Boa tarde a todos. Boa tarde, Thierry.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Thierry, heading the Department of Education in France. We have Geniani, working in Minas Gerais. We have Caetano, working with the Secretariat of Education in São Paulo. And this is a great opportunity for us because we're here to talk about a really important topic regarding formative assessment and curriculums. We're also talking about how to monitor these initiatives during such trying times. I would like to greet everyone who is here, teachers, managers, principals, everyone who is attending such an important event for assessment in Brazil. We do hope you enjoyed this afternoon. And I do believe that we'll end this conversation with many lessons learned. And for that, it is paramount for us to rely on our speakers, who are people who have been fostering high-quality public education. So first, we have Professor Geniana. She is the Assistant Secretary of the Secretariat of Education in the state of Minas Gerais. She has a master's degree. She studied psychopedagogy, and I've had the pleasure of seeing her journey heading the assessment department. She tackled a number of challenges, and she really shook things up. She was trying to promote better outcomes for students and teachers alike. And she is now continuing her work in the Secretariat of Education in the state of Minas Gerais. Geniana, you have 20 minutes. Could you please share some of your experience in the Secretariat of Education in the state of Minas Gerais? By the way, Santana sent everyone his regards, or her regards actually. But unfortunately, since she was busy, she had a prior appointment, Geniana is here to represent her. And I'm sure this is going to be an interesting conversation about formative assessment and how to deploy this curriculum in the state of Minas Gerais. Thank you very much.
Estão conosco nesse importante evento, né? E como muito bem disse Lina, em momento de extrema importância essa discussão.
I put it really well. This is a relevant conversation right now. I do hope this is an interesting afternoon. And it's great that we'll have this opportunity to exchange ideas and information with Thierry and Caetano. We usually have conversations, but now we'll have a public conversation, and we're going through such trying times that this is really important, especially because of the losses we've had because of the pandemic. So thank you for having me here, Lina. I'm really happy to be here and to get to share with you some of the experiences we had in the state of Minas Gerais.
Certinho, pode ir em frente.
Deu aí?
Great, we can see your screen. Great, thank you.
Bom, eu digo que a gente, quando pensa, não é, nas avaliações, não há como pensar em uma
So here's what I always say.
central, né, o ponto de partida.
Whenever we think about assessments, we need to think about its foundation, which is our curriculum.
Bastante importante de implementação do
In
currículo.
2020, we were going through a very key moment of deploying our curriculum.
Fazer pedagógico diante da pandemia, né? Então,
And then things were turned upside down, and we had to tackle these challenges even during the pandemic. So how can we change a curriculum during dark times? We basically had to reinvent our pedagogical process.
cinco grandes pontos, né? O planejamento das avaliações.
So we have 5 big topics to discuss today. Number 1, how to plan assessments. Number 2, how to put together these exams. Number 3, how to make results available. Number 4, general results. And number 5, how to use these results or outcomes pedagogically. So let's get started with how to plan for these assessments. As I was saying, we got started in 2020, and then we had to revisit everything as of March of 2020. So we were replanning a benchmark curriculum for the state of Minas Gerais based on information from 2018. So we worked on training for teachers during 2019 so that they knew how to use and how to work this curriculum, and deployment would take place as of 2020. So we were working on a course plan during 2019 and 2020. While discussing the curriculum, we were preparing a program so that teachers would have a systematic analysis to rely on. Now, this piece of planning was key because in 2020, we were able to put together what we call the Tutored study plan. We have a regimen for online activities in Minas Gerais. And because of our previous work on the curriculum, we knew what students had to learn during those school months. That is how we were able to organize the tutoring study plan, which we have been using for remote studying, and we have been using for hybrid teaching as well. So revisiting the curriculum and reorganizing it into this plan was key. We had pedagogical resources for students and teachers alike for remote work according to our curriculum, because we wanted to make sure we would cater to what they had to learn, and we wanted to make sure we would respect big milestones and key points. So based on this structured plan, we were able to come up with assessments. We were able to include in these assessments the skills that were provided for in the tutoring study plan. This was one of our challenges. We had to strike balance between the curriculum and everything we were studying in person and our assessments to make sure that assessments were a pedagogical tool, not only to check for what they were learning, but also to be able to use them to revisit our pedagogical approach. This is one of the biggest initiatives we had, and we needed it to make sense in our journey. Here we have some images of our logos. We see our course structure, we see the organization by skills and competencies, and we see the platform for assessments. Now, between September and October of 2020, we felt the need to understand what March through September had felt like. And we wanted to take the temperature and understand what our students had been able to learn. We had over 1 million students who took part in this diagnosis. It was a really significant number. And we made an assessment for every part of the curriculum because we truly wanted to understand how students were doing during remote teaching. We started with the second grade of elementary school to the third grade of high school. And we truly wanted to understand these students and to take into account the struggles and the hurdles of online teaching. Then in 2021, we carried out another diagnosis. We wanted to understand what our new students looked like, and we wanted to plan ahead for the year. We had over 1 million students, and we had our first quarterly assessment in June with 1.1 million students. Our second quarterly assessment was held in September with 1.2 million students, and then by the end of 2021, probably in November, we'll have our summative assessment. And as I was telling Lina, we had to think about a digital app. This was really challenging for us. This is something we had for 2020, but for 2021, we'll still have the digital assessment as well as the printed assessment, or the assessment in print. And carrying this out digitally was a challenge. We had had previous conversations about it, but we had to make this happen within a short window of time. We offered the assessment in printing for students who had no access to digital devices. Even for the digital assessment, we offered the possibility of these students going to school to complete the assessment, and we used the app that we have in the state of Minas Gerais for remote teaching. Another big challenge, but also big achievement, was translation into Braille. We really wanted every student to be a part of this assessment, and we learned a lot. We had Braille and sign language. We learned a lot, and this information will be useful for the plans we have for the future. Now let's talk about the exams and the target audience. In 2020, we had a smaller assessment with fewer items. And we had a very specific goal of understanding the process that our students go through. In 2021, we were able to create a more robust assessment. We wanted to be able to rearrange a few things and make important changes. That is why we see progress in how these assessments are organized. And once again, I would like to mention the tutoring plan because it was based on the curriculum. And using it was great because not only were we able to understand the development of our students, but we were also able to understand how the curriculum was being deployed in the state of Minas Gerais. This is why using this assessment pedagogically is something interesting, because we can truly understand how the curriculum is being deployed and whether or not our students and teachers are being successful in the development of these skills. We can look at it from up close to truly understand the challenges of working with the new curriculum, especially during the pandemic. So we had a diagnostic assessment at the beginning of the year with 40 items, then at the end of the year with 82 items. And then we have the second quarterly assessment with 44 items, 108 items for elementary school, and over 100 items for high school. As I was saying, we had more robust assessments for 2021. We had 8 different models according to curricular component. We also had a targeting by school year. We split these tests into 4 different tracks according to the field of knowledge. This was useful. It made things easier and lighter. And of course, we had a digital assessment, and we know that students struggle with new formats. And this is a big challenge for us. We want to make sure students are able to complete the assessment. So students would answer at least 44 questions or 113 questions tops according to their grade.
Another important advantage we had, and this is an improvement we have made, is how the results are made available. So we have a portal. It's called a SIMAVE portal, SIMAVE. So results are available there so that we could see the number of students taking the test and what the breakdown was per region, per school, because we know how important it is to understand these assessments. We need to have the assessments, and that's also very important. And we also need to understand how the assessment is carried out. So we have put together this dashboard that allows us to understand the breakdown on a state level, and Minas Gerais is a very large state, and it also has many very large cities. But this allowed us to keep a close eye on what was going on in every region and in every school. A very important factor, which is very dear to us, and that we know that we need to improve on, is how we use the results of the assessments. So the results of the assessments were available for the schools and for the teachers. So we knew what the percentage was of students getting answers right per discipline, per age, per grade, and we knew how many questions we gotten right and wrong, and we had the pedagogical assessment of each one of these items. So all of the school managers, as well as the teachers, they can see where students are struggling, where students are doing well, what disciplines are getting better performance, and what disciplines are getting a worse performance. And this allows us to review our teaching practices as well. So then students are better understood, and teachers understand how to deal with students and their needs. So then the teaching practices can really be reorganized to cater to whatever students needed, as we could see that some students were struggling to perform in certain disciplines or subjects. Something we didn't have, and it's something that we now have. This was a challenge, but it was very positive for students, and I'm talking about the individual student plan, or rather individual study plan. So students know what they got right, what they got wrong, and at the end of each assessment, there is a plan, an individual study plan that is generated. So students understand what subjects, what books, what classes, what other activities they can look at. All of the components that are related to what they're struggling with, so that they can improve on that. So students have access to this individual study plan. This is a novelty, and students were really excited about it. The schools were also very excited about it. And this gave students agency in their learning process, so they could understand what they needed to focus more on. I'm not going to delve into the details of this part of the presentation, but we can see the number of students that took the assessments. This was a concern of ours. We know that many of these assessments aren't seen as something positive oftentimes. So it's important that we work on the communication so that students understand that this is a pedagogical process aiming to really understand what they need help with, so that we can then put together strategies to cater to those needs. And we did have a good rate of students showing up to take the test. Now we know what students know, and we know what they don't know. So we have a clearer idea of what we need to be more careful with. We know where we're lagging behind. We know there's a lot to be done to really try and mitigate all of the difficulties created by what is areas where we're lagging behind. We have a number of cities in the state of Minas Gerais that haven't gone back to in-person classes yet. And we know that every day with a student outside of class is an opportunity for us to try and address this, this problem. So we really need to understand how big a gap we have. I'm not going to talk too much about this either.
Coisas importantes que nos ajudam também a monitorar.
There are other important things that help us monitor. And to deploy a curriculum, we need to think of the curriculum, think of the organization of the assessments. We need to look at the results. We need to understand what we still need. And that would apply to teaching and learning. And when we look at teaching, you understand what the challenges for teachers are. We really see where teachers are struggling to teach. We can see where students are getting things right. We can see where students are getting things wrong. We have here all of the competencies assessed. We have mathematics, a linear function to be understood from the algebra representation. And here we can understand what our essential skills and competencies are. This is a very important part of the curriculum, that we understand what the essential skills are. We need to understand what we needed to do so that students got to the end of 2020, 2021, having what they needed. So what are the essential skills? How that is organized, and what strategies we needed. We need to focus on the skills that can't be left unattended. If we fail to do what we need to, that will have an even bigger impact on student school performance. We were very pleased to see how many people took part in the tests, and we could see how engaged they were. the assessments looking at all of the grades in the in elementary school and middle school, as well as in high school. We were able to have more robust and thorough tests with at least 40 questions. And the assessments really show us the way for us to know where we need to act. With them, we have more evidence around where students are struggling, as well as where teachers are struggling. And that allows us to rethink our teaching approaches in our school network. We also looked at the 7th, 8th, 9th grade and the 3 years of the high school. We see that they need more attention. The 9th grade of middle school and the 3rd grade of high school normally do better at interpreting information or data on charts and tables. Students in the final year of the middle school can normally understand more varieties of spoken language, and students in the final year of the middle school and high school can better understand graphs and charts as well. Here we have some aspects around the pedagogical aspects in Portuguese teaching, the Portuguese language. Students have better development, rather better performance when dealing with texts that are closer to everyday language, like comic strips, for example. The worst performance has normally to do with skills where they need to infer more from text. That's quite clear to us. Also, when they need to understand the opinions of text and literature. So literary texts are also more difficult. This assessment, this pedagogical assessment of the tests allows us really to make a lot of progress, this analysis of these assessments. We perceive the assessments better now. So we have the teams that put together the materials, but the results of the assessments were sometimes not as clear to us. So I think we have made very good progress there. I'm running out of time, I believe. Well, you have run out of time a while ago, actually. Sorry. So just to wrap up, we have here some results that allowed us to rethink our teaching approaches and the teaching staff. We organized or selected rather teachers per subject and per grade to join the continuing education program. We looked at the skills that had performed worst, and then we had specific teacher training to address these gaps. We had support classes that were also offered based on skills that were weaker. That for support classes and any other type of pedagogical intervention. We also had schools that needed more support in organizing the school curriculum. They were still struggling to understand and organize the the standards. And we're looking at best practices. And this is the Prêmio Escola Transformação, that is the award for school and transformation. We understand that assessment is crucial in education. And here we had an investment of over 100 million reals to really support schools that engaged their students and staff, that used all of the tools during remote teaching, and that were really taking good care of the teaching process with teachers and students. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think it's important, or it's clear how important it is that we have a new perspective around assessments, and we needed to understand that diagnostic and formative assessments needed to be on a different level of our pedagogical organization. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Geniana. Thank you from everyone at Abavi. This is a brilliant presentation, and we can see you try to implement an integration between curriculum, study plan, assessment, and overall planning. And I am a witness to this process. CAED had the pleasure of being a part of this deployment. And I was able to see how much progress you made in the Secretariat in Minas Gerais. You had conversations with teams working with the curriculum, with teaching, with resources. It became really clear that you had very good rapport between these teams. Thank you. Thank you for this great presentation. And I'm really touched, actually, because you are from Minas Gerais, and I can relate to that. Thank you so much. All right, so now we have Caetano Siqueira. Mr. Caetano graduated in economics by the University of São Paulo. He has a master's in education by the Stanford University. And I had the opportunity of knowing Caetano in the world of educational assessment. He has a lot of experience in the group called Geeky. He has been working a lot with the use of assessments, with the production of exams, and with the use of evidence from assessments in school planning. Caetano has also had a lot of experience in the Secretariat of Education in the state of São Paulo regarding how to build and deploy a curriculum, how to also create teaching resources and materials, and how to distribute that. I'm also a witness to the efforts that the State Secretariat in São Paulo made to make sure these materials, these books, reached every student, and to make sure that we had equal opportunities. Janiana was saying something about this. So I think we had similar journeys with different experiences and circumstances because of sizes and different specificities. We had the media center in São Paulo as well. But Caetano, you have 20 minutes to talk about your journey with so many challenges and so many achievements as well. And I would say that we would be doing really badly without the change that you implemented. Thank you. Go ahead, Caetano. Thank you. Thank you for having me. First, I would like to thank Lina, and I would like to greet Janiana and Thierry, my fellow panelists. As Lina was saying, at the same time, we have similar and different challenges, and they are equally challenging. We're sometimes texting and trying to pick our brains and understand how people are tackling some issues, and we know that other states are also going through similar things. but it's great to see you all here. Today, in a way, my presentation will bring information that is similar to what the state of Minas Gerais did. I will be sharing my slide deck as well, but I have to tell you, I have so many questions for Giniana because I would love to learn from their strategy in Minas Gerais. After this half-hour presentation, I feel like I'm learning a lot as well from the initiatives they had in Minas Gerais. So let me tell you about the things we did in the state of São Paulo. We can talk about formative assessment overall, and of course, I will also be touching on some other subjects or topics that are connected to assessment. And then I'll be happy to take any questions you might have. Let me start by giving you a bit of context on the Secretariat of Education in the state of São Paulo. Our first highlight, which we should mention here, is that our Secretariat hasn't fully made education local. We have almost 40% of students in the first years of elementary school in the state network and almost 60% in the last year. That is why we have 3.4 million students. And of course, we also have adult education. Of course, this has consequences for the state of São Paulo, and we'll be talking about this. We have 91 educational units, which are regional centers in 5.1 thousand state schools. And we have different types. We usually have basic education schools, elementary education schools, and high schools. So we have schools only for the first years of elementary school, and we have other schools that could have the middle years and the final years as well. And of course, we have to mention the pandemic. Now, before the pandemic, as Geniana was saying, we were about to change our curriculum. So in 2019, before the pandemic, we were actually working on the deployment of a curriculum in the state of São Paulo for elementary school. So 2019 was supposed to be a year of transitions for elementary school. And we would actually get started with the São Paulo curriculum for elementary school as of 2020. But that's when the pandemic hit. And we usually joke around, and this is what we say. We say, well, this is just perfect. You know, having to deploy a public policy that is brand new during a pandemic. So, of course, this adds to the challenge of deploying a new curriculum. And obviously, the state of São Paulo already had a curriculum, but this one was based on the Brazilian Common Core. This one had been around for 10 years, and it was the perfect moment for this transition. But of course, its deployment was challenging because of circumstances, because of the pandemic. Here's another highlight. Since 2019, we had been working on a recovery and follow-up program. We wanted it to be parallel to regular classes to make sure that no student would fall behind. We wanted to follow up on them as time went by to make sure that everyone was up to date on what they had to learn. I will be talking more about this later.
As atividades escolares não presenciais,
Now, specifically when it comes to the pandemic, we all know that even though we made an effort to make sure digital classes were interesting and were great, we still had big losses when going online. So the pandemic came with a few losses as well. We can clearly see that in learning. We also see higher risks of dropout rates going up. We know that 2020 and 2021 are years that need to be taken into account within the context of a continuing curriculum. And we did what we could to mitigate these risks, but we know that some students would be going to school and they haven't yet. And of course, we also have losses and harms related to mental health. By the way, we had an opportunity to measure the losses brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic on our students. And we started 2021 with the second wave of COVID-19 in the state of São Paulo. And at the time, we were having in-person classes. Meanwhile, during the first weeks of the year, we had our diagnosis assessment for every student. And we were able to do some sampling with a very robust approach to compare these results to other results that represent the whole district or the whole network. We had these assessments for Portuguese and math for the end of every educational block. We wanted to represent the state of São Paulo. Of course, we had external validation and a lot of robustness in this assessment. Of course, we also had CAED, our partner, who helped us with this assessment. We've been collaborating for a while, but CAED was key for this assessment at the beginning of 2021 because we truly wanted a robust assessment of learning. So this is what we found out. We are talking about around 7,000 students in every block, almost 400 schools for every block, and these were our results for Portuguese. And I won't delve into the details because this is basically just a diagnosis. And I am comparing this state to a summative assessment we had at the end of 2019. But what this means is that we were able to compare results at the beginning of 2021 to the results we had at the beginning of 2019, or at the end of 2019, actually. And we see a decrease in proficiency for every block and for every subject. That applies to both Portuguese and math. And we see even greater differences in math. And we see even more drastic results for basic education. So we see a bigger point of concern for elementary school. And of course, here we have a little bit more control over this process because we have elementary schools under the state umbrella. Now, why were we doing so badly in proficiency in Portuguese for the 5th grade in this case? Well, when we compare 5th grade results in São Paulo for SAEB for every year, we can see the diagnosis we had at the beginning of 2021. And we can see that these results are closer to our history from 2811, so 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. So that's when, in average, our students scored 192 points. So going back to these results 10 years later is a big point of concern. Because especially for elementary school, São Paulo made a lot of progress in the quality of its state education in the past decade. So seeing that we're going back in time by 10 years is really worrying. I won't delve into details because we are running short on time, but my take-home message here is that this is a red flag. Not having in-person classes could lead to these losses.
So this makes it quite clear why we were so motivated to work on the recovery program. We put it together based on the curriculum skills and competencies. So we're not only looking at a new curriculum, but we're also looking at the essential skills. And these skills became what we termed essential skills that were used as a reference for this recovery program. So we have paper-based textbooks and materials that are used for these recovery activities. So we have booklets for science, maths, and so on. And this applied for elementary school, middle school, and high school. There is specific information around each skill and the teaching sequence that is selected for these materials. And all of that is organized according to the program. We have specific training and information for teachers as well as for the students. All of the paper-based material is organized with the media center that we have in São Paulo. That is the platform that we have for remote classes that can be seen on television and through the app. So those students that are not in person at school, when they're not there at school, they will be watching it from home on TV or through the app. We currently have part of the students going to school and part of the students staying at home, taking turns. So it is a hybrid approach. And we're also working with the teaching teams of schools, so the pedagogical teams of schools, so that we can keep track of the activities every school is performing, and so that everyone is catered to. We look at all of these elements in a very integrated fashion, and that's one point that I think is worth highlighting. And assessments play a key role. Assessments are crucial for us to understand where the gaps are, and so that we can really bridge this gap between what we are giving the school network and what the students will take from teachers, what teachers are going to be doing in a more customized, bespoke fashion in the classes. So I really think that assessment plays this role. This is a very large school network, so there is a limit to what we can do from a central coordination, but we need to organize with each school, pardon me, so that we can really see what they need. And we have a number of tools when it comes to assessment. this is sort of a timeline. So we start the school year with the diagnosis, right, a diagnostic assessment. And then we have other elements that I'm going to be touching on.
Consequências digitais de atividades, né? Então,
and then we have digital activities.
Essas sequências digitais casadas, muito casadas com
that are really matched to the paper-based materials that students have. So there is a digital and a paper-based component, and they match.
Exercício para o estudante, né? Então ele também está aprendendo com essas sequências.
These are somehow exercises for students, but the teachers will also have a customized report of how the skills of those students are being developed.
Sequência digital faz essa ponte.
So we do have that.
A gente vai ainda fazer pela primeira vez a avaliação de fluência em leitura a nível estadual.
We're going to have the reading fluency assessment.
Ver como vai isso.
We're going to have it for the first time now. And at the end of each bimester,
Ao final de cada bimestre, de forma escrita,
we have an assessment that takes place in writing, and we have a socio-emotional self-assessment. Students can express themselves about what they can show, what they have achieved in Portuguese and mathematics. And this goes from the start of elementary school until the end of high school. And we know it's a challenge to have that for all of the subjects. And we also have this socio-emotional self-assessment. Students can then ponder upon how they have performed, how they've developed. We have the life project subject as well, which is a subject that we have starting in middle school. And this live project is then discussed with teachers. And then we have SARESP, which is the summative assessment. Of course, we have SAEB some years, right? The Basic Education Assessment Test. That's what SAEB stands for. But we also have this local test on the year after, in the year after the SAEB. And the result will be published in January so that the results can be used for the next school year. And one point I wanted to highlight here is that we have feedback of all of the processes to teachers. This has been digital. And all of that has teacher training as well. Every 2 weeks, teachers have a teacher training session, and that will be focused on their subject as well as the grade they teach. So a Portuguese language teacher for the first year of middle school will have different training to the Portuguese teacher in the final year of middle school. So we have specific training for specific subjects and years, taking into account what is going to be happening that couple of weeks or the next fortnight, right, or the next month. And we also instruct them on how to use the results of assessments to their benefit so that they can improve their teaching practices in light of what they have learned from the assessment. I had so much to say in such a short period of time, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how the state of São Paulo organizes the structure and the role played by assessment. So we do have diagnostic assessments at the start of the year. We have summative assessments at the end of the year. But in the course of the year, we have different types of assessments that are used. We have bimesterly cycles in São Paulo, that is every 2 months. And in every cycle, you can reflect upon students' development and performance, and the teachers are able to tweak and adapt their teaching program so that it will meet the needs of that class, of that student, and everything is monitored constantly and continuously. So this is the end of my presentation, but I'm available for questions should you need any further information. Thank you. All right. That was an excellent presentation, Caetano. You were extraordinary. You were able to summarize so much in such a short period of time. And it's clear how relentless you are in pursuing the bridging of the gaps that we have arising, right? And I see points in common between Minas Gerais and São Paulo when it comes to the curriculum, the deployment of a new curriculum during the pandemic. And we could see the use of assessments and the results of assessments being used as well. And another important thing, sorry, my video was off, apologies. And I can see that when you show, for example, the results of assessment and you look at the final year of elementary school, you'll look at the essential skills, and then you talk about the very important assessment, which is reading fluency assessment. Students can't read fluently, they can't read accurately, they can't read swiftly. They, if they are unable to read successfully, then they are bound to struggle in their studies in the future. And also the digital teaching points that you talked about. I'm dying to know more about it, know more about the challenges as well, because you spoke about the digital points and you spoke about the media center, and I could really see that you were really going that extra mile to make sure that students got what they needed. And it's clear how challenging a setting you were in. But I was really curious to hear more about the project. And again, congratulations on your presentation. You and Geniana did a brilliant job here. It was a very smooth presentation. And you're not presenting something that you heard about or you saw happen. You are painting this portrait as you show it at this exhibition. So it is brilliant to see you do that. And I don't say that as a moderator of a panel, but I say that as someone who's really been keeping track and monitoring what they have been doing, really watching their progress. So you've really done everything in your power to make sure that we can have the best education possible in São Paulo and in Minas Gerais. That's why I think this is so important in the Abave context. And now we're going to have our very dear Thierry. Thierry, I can only say that you're very dear because you're such a dear person to me. You are such a nice man, and we're all very fond of you here in this assessment world. And you're always such an accessible person, right? And you're always willing to help us in the assessment. He is a member of the Ministry of Education in France. He's also a member of the PISA organization committee, the Program for International Students Assessment, and he's a member of the Permanent Committee of the IEA. Thierry, so I'm very happy to read your mini bio. That's a very short mini bio. I know there's, that didn't cover everything. And I'm a very old woman now, and I had the chance to see Thierry as an intern when he was taking his first baby steps. And while Jacqueline was still the president of the Education Bureau, and from 2000 to 2022, Thierry has had this beautiful, extraordinary journey, and he has been really working relentlessly to improve the quality of education for children and adolescents in France. So Thierry, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for allowing the whole of the assessment teams here in Brazil to learn from you. And you're an extremely competent man. So now I'll hand it over to you, right? And now everyone is very excited about your presentation, I assume. So off you go, Thierry.
Thank you very much, Lina, Katia. It's a real pleasure for me to participate to this panel discussion, and it's always a pleasure. And I want to thank the ABAV organizer to invite me to this panel. And I have to say that I was really interested by the presentation from Geniana and from Caetano. I mean, I learned a lot, and I thought it was a very impressive work that you are doing in your respective states, and honestly, I'm very impressed. So, and a lot of questions for you, and a lot of things to learn, I'm sure. So thank you for that. First, I'm very happy to be that and to be there. And Lina, Katia, thank you very much for your kind word. You're also very dear to me, I have to say. It's a long friendship that we have, as you said, and I'm very happy about that. And it's also a long friendship between my institution, the DEP, and the CAED. We've been working for more than 20 years now together, and we have learned from each other each time, and we still continue to collaborate. So I'm very, very happy to be with you today. And I will share with you some experience, or let's say what we organize in France in terms of student assessment, and try to show you maybe the link between standardized assessment and formative assessment through the digitalization of the assessment we have engaged in France. So let me share this with you. I'm from the DEP. The DEP is the statistical department of the Ministry of Education, and we are in charge of many assessment programs in France. So I will just start by some information about the context in terms of assessment in France. And then I would like to focus my presentation on the so-called the digitalization of the assessment and the technology enhanced assessment that we are running, and how we can use that to do diagnostic and formative assessments. And at the end, I would like just to mention a collaboration that we have between many institutions in the world, and I'm sure you would be interested to know more about this association, and hopefully some institution in Brazil could join this collaboration. So first, the context. So as you can see, France is like a kind of a small state in Brazil compared to Brazil. But so that's not exactly the same scale, but I will go through it in terms of numbers. We have about 13 million students from let's say age 3 to age 18, roughly, and there are in France 1 million employees. I mean, Ministry of Education is the largest employer in France, I have to say. We are quite a centralized state compared to Brazil. We are very centralized, even though we have some regional organization with a lot of elementary schools compared to the number of pupils, like more than 50,000 elementary schools and 11,000 secondary schools. So that's the big picture of our education system, just to give you an idea. In terms of assessment, what we organize at the DEP, as I said, we are the Department of the Statistics at the Ministry of Education. The organization of the standardized assessments are as follows. That means there are 3 levels of assessment. That's the classroom level. That means the use of the results for the teachers at a very classroom level. For example, in terms of diagnostic, to do some pedagogical interventions at the beginning of the year. Then there is a second level, is a local level. This is aimed to provide indicators to educational managers to monitor the local system. And then there is a national level. Then we provide some national indicators, trends, international comparison, and so on. So that's the rationale for our assessment, the 3 levels from very individual within the classrooms to the national level. And I will not go into details, but just to show you that there are 3 blocks, let's say, of assessment programs that we are running. There are some national surveys, that means sample-based program assessments. For example, it's quite similar to the SAEB program. We have different kinds of SAEB programs, either subject-based, either cross-curricular based, either longitudinal also program, or also some program for policy evaluations. That's one block, sample-based. There is another block, sample-based, which are the international surveys. Like, of course, I'm sure you know PISA, you know Perth, maybe, and TIMSS, and Brazil is joining as well from IEA program, and I'm very happy about that. IEA is the association running the international surveys, Perth, TIMSS, ICLS, ICCS, and I have also the honor to chair the IEA association. It's an association, and I'm very happy to see Brazil joining some more programs now of the association. And then the third block is about nationwide assessment programs. That means every students are taking the assessments in grade 1, 2, 6, and 10. And I will go a bit more into details in these programs because there was a lot of stress put on this program these past years. So these programs are, like, as you can see here, it's like a representation of the school system from year 1, which is the first year of the school system, to the year 12, which is the final year with the so-called baccalaureate, the final exam in year 12. So we have, as you can see, an assessment at the beginning of the year 1, at the beginning of the year 2, beginning of the year 6, and beginning of the year 10. And each time it corresponds to the transition from primary schools to lower secondary schools to upper secondary schools. So that's the key point and transition in our system. We do an assessment at the beginning of the school year. Each grade, we assess around 800,000 students. And I'm sorry, I will not give you slides about the results or assessment of the impact of the crisis, but just to give you some word about that. If you look at the assessment in beginning of year 2, for example, we observed a decrease in terms of performance. So this assessment is in September. So it's the beginning of the school year in France. So in September 2000, compared to September 2020 compared to 2019, we observed a decrease of performance in year 2 especially. That means there was an impact of the school closure in year 1 on the pupils' attainment. But I have to say it was quite limited. because in France we had a strong policy of not to close the schools. I mean, the schools in France were closed 6 weeks in 2020, and that's all. So, of course, sometimes some of the schools can close for 1 week or classes from 1 week, etc., depending on some cases of COVID in some schools. But in general, we only close the schools for six weeks. So we are one of the countries in the world that where the school closure was the very, very limited, I have to say. So it was a strong debate in France, a strong policy, I have to say, and our minister, I mean, when was argued a lot to not close the schools for a long time. So I have to say, globally, thanks to this assessment, we could measure the impact, and the impact is, I have to say, not so important on the student performance. And the most important ones are in year one, because year one, as you know, of course, is the very early learning competencies like reading and numbers and so on. So, and for parents, it was much more difficult for them to take over this kind of competencies. Now I would like to focus a bit on the digitalization, as I told you, of our assessment. And since 2015, we have done the transition from paper-based assessment to what I call e-assessment, electronic assessment, either computer-based assessment or tablet-based assessment. And we have seen in that a lot of opportunities, like cost reduction, the engagement of pupils, of course, the way, and also the idea of doing some adaptive testing that we are implementing, the accessibility for handicapped students, for example, the interactivity, I will come back on that, and some other features like analysis of process data, and I will come back on that. But also some new challenges, like the school equipment, but in secondary schools in France, I have to say also here the situation is quite positive, but it's not the case in primary schools. We also had some worries about the comparability and the mode effect, but I think Geniana also was talking about that the familiarity of students with the computers and so on, it's a very big topic, and we have some studies on that, and it's I have to say, not an easy one. And also some challenges, of course, in terms of assessing some specific competencies like writing, for example. It's something much more difficult to assess on a computer. And like technical also challenges like security, confidentiality, and so on. But we've seen a lot of advantages, and I want to show you some advantages in terms of using some technology enhanced items, using all the opportunities of the technology to produce some improved situation of assessment in order to better assess students in a way. So these are some examples, like very typical that you can imagine on a paper, but here it's on a computer, like a multiple choice question, all these kind of things. These are very usual example we are using in our assessment. But what I want to show you is like more interactive situations. Like, for example, on the left-hand side, you can see there is a so-called number line. So it's a time-limited test that we ask the students to put on the line a number, and then as quickly as possible. Another kind of test is like the speed test here in lexical decision, on the bottom of the screen. That means the students have to decide if the word exists or not, which is a lexical decision test, quite typical, but thanks to the computer, we could implement this test at a large scale level. So in order to assess like basic skills, we can rely on this kind of interactive item. Of course, in math, there is a lot of opportunities also to use interactive and technology enhanced item. We have developed quite a lot of items in order to assess, for example, geometry skills or solving equations and so on for let's say higher grade students. These are just examples I would like to show you also in terms of so-called 21st century skills. And on the left-hand side, you can see there is a so-called chatbot, and the students interact with an avatar, with a fake student, and there is a dialogue with a kind of robot, let's say, and they have to, it's a creativity test in order to invent a story. And on the right side, you have a programming task. It's typical, maybe you know that environment like so-called Scratch. So it's like programming by block. And we have a lot of, in our curricula in France, we have a lot of, let's say, stress on this kind of, put on this kind of skills in terms of programming. So these are some possibilities I would like to show you regarding technology enhanced items. But maybe now more interestingly for people who want to be involved in a more pedagogical, didactic approach is how we can use this kind of items to better understand the students' processes, to better diagnose students' abilities, and then we are in a more diagnostic assessment or more, let's say, formative assessment, less than summative. So just to give you this example, sorry, I went a bit fast. This is an article, but you can find a reference afterwards, of course. It's an article published by some of my colleagues, and it's about, the title is When Didactics Meet Data Science. That means how we can combine the theoretical approach in didactics, in math here, and the data science approach, a more statistical approach. So this is the example they took. It's about 2 trees, the growth of 2 trees, and the students have to determine, to find out at which age, which is at the x-axis, the trees will have the same height, which is on the y-axis. So they can make some try and guess in the table. They can use a pen. They can search by themselves, etc. So there is a lot of possibilities to solve this item, and they can do like multiple operations to do that. So it's about the understanding of what is a function at the end of the day. So that's the interesting thing. There is a theory or didactic theory about the level of understanding of what is a function. Here we are with students of grade 8 students. And so my colleagues, they collected some data. And as you can see, this is data for 20 seconds using the items. And then it's quite messy in a way, this kind of data, and how we can use this data and to reveal significant information from this data. And the real question is that, is there signal in the noise? It's a lot of noise. I mean, students, they can use the pen, they can do whatever they want, but at the end of the day, is it connected to some abilities? And I won't go into details, but you can read the article. My colleagues, they found out they could distinguish some typical classes of students according to some of approach in terms of didactics, in terms of understanding what is a function. If the students may understanding what is a function in terms of an operational approach, and a function is with an input and an output. This is an operational approach, operational view. And or if they understood what is a function in terms of structural approach, that means more the shape of the function, mathematical properties. So that's here the idea is that you can, let's say, have some cluster of students, and then using the process data, the log data, then you can categorize the students and then be able to give more meaning about how they solve the problem. And then you, of course, for a teacher, it's very important to know this kind of a profile of students. So students may answer the item maybe correctly, or wrongly, but maybe they not with the same processes. So that's the big advantage to use a process data in order to capture more the student's profile. So this was an example I would like to show you. And then just to finish with, I would like to talk to you about an initiative we are running since some years now. In 2017, we just gather with some colleagues around the world in Luxembourg, Italy, and Portugal, and France. So that the acronym FLIP come from there. And we exchange our experiences in terms of computer-based assessment. And then the CAID joined 1 year later, and then other countries join, other institutions, and now today we are like 25 institutions in the world specialized in assessment. And the motto, the idea is to share our experience, to share the technology, and to share the content. So that's exactly what I just said. That means we started just to share the knowledge, as we have done with the CAED for years now, with knowledge, sharing knowledge experiences. We also share technology solution. I mean, all the items I just show you, they are in open source, they are available, and that's something we all share because we think that's important to share. And and we have some technological more dedicated group that works on these items. And so we are really like a community oriented in an open source way and solutions. And then the last project that we have now is also sharing content. That means sharing the items themselves. And that's the project of building a so-called item library, a worldwide item library where we share the items all together. So that's a project we just designed the project this year, and then we are about to develop the platform hopefully during the next coming year, and that's the big project of the Flip Plus community. And then the vision, just to come back to the formative assessment, is that this platform, this item library project, could be used around the world, not only by specialized institutions in assessment, but also, why not, by teachers in their classrooms. And they can be used as a tool to assess students, to do some diagnostic, to do some formative assessment, and also summative with standardized items and calibrated items. So that's a very ambitious project. We start small, but we really hope to finish big. That's my so thank you very much. Obrigado. And thank you to the translators as well. I've known Brazil for a long time, but I'm sorry I don't speak Brazilian Portuguese so well. So thank you for the translators for their work.
Thank you, Thierry, for your fantastic presentation. Thank you for sharing your experiences. I have the opportunity to be part of FLIP, and I can see how important this institution is, this association is. We can see how important it is to share information, technology, item libraries, analyses, instructions. This activity carried out by FLIP is absolutely extraordinary, really. And I know that it was a bit of your brainchild, right, with other people. And I have been part of some meetings as well. And I've seen how you stood your ground and you didn't let go of FLIP and this initiative. And it's not easy to share content, right? It's not easy to share knowledge. It's not easy to share these protocols. These protocols can be completely different sometimes. And the paths to resolution may also be completely different. So Thierry, thank you very much. That was an extraordinary talk. And we have a number of questions here, but we will unfortunately not have time for all of them. So I have singled out one question per speaker, and I'd like to invite you then to answer the question when it's asked and also make your final remarks so that we can wrap up our panel. This is such a fantastic event for all of us. So I'm going to find my first question here for Geniana. So Geniana, I'd like to know if in Minas Gerais, we had any type of flexibilization of the curriculum for the years of 20 to 2021 and for the Common Core, that is, and if that has happened or if it's going to happen in any way. Thank you, Lina. If I understand the question correctly, in Minas, we have organized that based on the essential skills. I'm not sure what the person asking the question means by flexibility. We worked with the essential skills, and the study plan and assessments were organized focusing on these essential skills. So we did have a reorganization of the curriculum of the Common Core, and we focused on what was absolutely crucial and indispensable. And I'd like just to make my final remarks. Now, Lina, all of that is available. The website is Studi Casa. That's a very nice play on words with the accent for people from Minas Gerais and the way they would say studying from home. So please, if you can write the website down. And I'd like to thank you, Lina, and I'd like to thank Abavi for this opportunity. It really is an opportunity to be here, an opportunity to exchange with Caetano, with Thierry, and I hope I have added value to this panel, to those that were listening to us. So thank you very much. And I'm very grateful for everything that you have done in all these years. Yes, we're a team. Thank you. Caetano, now one question for you. I'm actually going to ask you two questions because they're sort of related here, but I'd like to know how the pedagogy coordinators are trained in the São Paulo school network, and I'd like to know if the results arising from the pandemic are being published, and I'd like to see that document if possible. Thank you very much, and congratulations. All right, brilliant. Thank you for your questions. So, about training the coordinators. What we have here, and you can get more details about it if you wish, we have a formative pedagogical network. So for every 5 schools, there is a pedagogy coordinator that will be assisting these 5 schools and who's going to be present at the schools once a week. So they spend a full day at each school every week. And they train the school coordinators, showing how activities need to be carried out. There is an agenda, right? A program that we put together centrally so that we can standardize these standardize these visits to a certain level, to a certain extent. And at the end of the quarter, we talk about the quarterly assessments. At the start of the quarter, we talk about the use of the previous quarter's assessments and how we can use that. So the subjects that are discussed have to do with the moment that we're in, but the focus of these coordinators is really to understand what the specificities of each community is, so that it really is sort of a local consultant with this formative type of approach, right? So it's a consulting type of service, an advisor that will be supporting these schools. So I think this is the most interesting activity that we have when it comes to training, really, teacher training and coordinator training. And when it comes to diagnostic assessment, we have a full report. We published that report at the start of the year, and you can find that on the website, on our website of the Department of Education of the City of São Paulo. I'll find the website address for you in a moment and give you the exact address. I'd like to thank Lina, Thierry, and Jiniana for being with me on this panel. And what we do at the Department of Education of the State of São Paulo is always available for anyone who would like to see it. And we are really available here to support you, give you any information. I'm always happy to learn from other people as well. Thank you very much, Caetano. It was great to hear what you have to say about all of your experience in dealing with the pandemic and really seeing what the State of São Paulo has been doing. Thank you very much.
Thierry, we have so many questions for you, but I put them together and I will try to ask two questions that are extremely important. First question. When we talk about practical activities in the classroom in France, are these practical activities similar to the activities in an exam, in an assessment? Do you use computers, and do you do in the classroom activities that then students will carry out during the assessment? So are they familiarized with the activities that we saw in the evaluations that you brought to us? And the second question is really specific, but I think it's interesting, so I'm going to ask it. You gave us an example of a function. So how can this answer be categorized in items so that we can handle this information? And can you please add in the chat a link to the research you mentioned? And finally, let me just ask a question of mine. Is there any group in France to work with producing items on computers to measure more complex skills related to creativity? Do you have any kind of measurements for that? Any items, any research, any studies, any tests or pre-tests for creativity? Well, I know this is a lot of questions. I hope you were able to understand them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all this very relevant question. And the first question is about, yes, the familiarity of students of using, for example, computer in the classrooms. That's a very important question. And in France, I have to say, I have to confess that with the study ICLS from the IEA, we just observed that our teacher doesn't use so much the digital technologies in their lessons, in their practices, and so on. That's the use is quite low. I would like to say it's growing, but it's still low. So then regarding the assessments, that's the key question. So then what we are doing also with this kind of complex assessment, we are running some so-called user experience studies. That means with some researchers, they are observing how the students they interact with the assessments in order to capture their behaviors, to be sure that we have some valid evidence on their competencies. So that's something, yes, we should be always very careful about the gap possibly that we may have between the practices in the classrooms and the assessment and the exams, of course. So that's something we try to look at on a qualitative, some qualitative approach. Yeah, and the second question about the function and the way that we just, I will put the link in the chat afterwards. Then you can have it for the articles, and you will see that it's all about using some actions from the students. For example, if a student is using a pen, often a pen, then it's maybe a sign that he understood more deeply what is a function, the shape of a function. But then on the other hand, if he enters a lot of values to try to find the answer, maybe he didn't understand so well, or maybe understand in a more less mature way, let's say, what is a function. But the important thing is that you may have some pupils that are at different level of comprehension. Every teachers know that, but I mean, you have pupils with different level of understanding, but they can succeed in an assessment. Some of the pupils, they have a deeper understanding, but they may fail an assessment. So that's it's not because you can have some let's say efficient way to solve a problem, and you may have some less efficient way to solve a problem. And but at the end of the day, you may solve the problem. That's the idea here of the task, is that to capture not only the proficiency of the students, if he solves at the end of the problems, but the way he solved the problem. And that's the key difference. And for formative purposes, it's very important to know about the processes and not only about the performance. So I will put the link in the chat, and then the last question, if I remember well, Lina, Katia, you told me. Please remind me the last question.
A última pergunta era
Of course, the last question is related to how to assess creativity.
Yes, sorry.
Do you have any tests for that?
Yes, so we started some work with a group of researchers in France, a creativity test in math and also in French, so in language. And we have another, but more, let's say, ambitious work about creativity in a collaborative environment. How do we create in a collaborative way? So that's for us, it's like early research, but we have some materials, online assessment. We tested that on a large scale level. So we are at the time now, we try to build a calibrated standardized test. And by the way, I have to say there is a project in the future with between France and Brazil that was submitted to the National Agency of Research very recently about that, and with the Ayrton Senna Institute and the University of Paris, and also the CAED is also there was some discussion with the CAED on that, how you can help on implementing this kind of approach. So that's a very promising topic, and I'm sure we will be able to share a lot of assessments all together between France and Brazil and other countries, and that's why also the FLIP organization is done. So if you belong to an institution, a public institution, please look at the Flip Plus initiative, and you are very welcome to join the adventure with all of us.
É ponto muito importante que o Thierry levantou.
This is a really important point, Thierry. You could become a member of the FLIP initiative as an individual or as an institution. And it's a great idea to become a member. You have yearly meetings, you exchange information and ideas, you have information about items and evaluations or assessments. And you know, you used to have Portugal, Luxembourg, France, and Italy. And then CAED was kind of helping out and doing some work, but then we saw the concrete possibility of becoming a member, and that's how we became a member as an institution. But people can register as individuals, and it's really worth it. I highly recommend it. Great, I see Thierry has shared a link. Thank you, Thierry. So please become a member. All right, everyone. We've run out of time. This is unfortunate because time flew by and this was a really fruitful conversation. And Thierry, I think we're all envious of you because being closed for only 6 weeks is amazing. It sounds amazing. It's what we would have wanted. We've been closed down basically since April of last year, almost 200 school days. And secretariats are working hard, schools are working hard, teachers are working hard, but we face so many obstacles. We see so many things. You know, we deserve a round of applause to all of these people. This has been truly impressive. You've just seen a sample of what the secretariats in Minas Gerais and São Paulo have been doing. They have a number of initiatives, but more than that, we had a national movement to really make things
para que essa defasagem e a desigualdade fosse menor. A gente sempre falou aqui na BAV, e o tema da BAV é desigualdade, que a questão
Abavi always talks about inequality, and we always mention inequality between schools and between districts. However, right now, we are extremely concerned about inequality within the classroom, among classmates. We are witnessing the fact that in one classroom, we see people at different levels who belong in different school years, actually. And what we saw with Caetano is precisely that, a fifth-year student who has the skills of a 2-year or a second-year student. Different rates of achievement, different struggles, and we see that these struggles do not belong in that grade, but actually belong 3 grades down, 3 grades back. This is really, really worrying. This is really challenging. But, you know, as we usually say in Brazil, we are Brazilians and we never give up. And we are educators and we have a mission here. I believe everyone who is attending our conference and everyone who understands that assessments are extremely important to ensure our fundamental right to learning is going to appreciate that. Assessments have always been important, but they are even more important now. And if in the past external factors would have an impact on school achievement, this effect is even greater now. So yes, we're all envious of you for your 6 weeks of closure. This is truly a privilege in such a challenging time. The pandemic is challenging. It's not in the past yet. We still have a lot of COVID-19 in Brazil, and we still have many deaths. Our vaccination efforts have been challenging for governors, for example. People have been working hard, but we still have a long way to go. And schools are now reorganizing its activities to go back to in-person classes. But you know what, Thierry? I am sure we'll be able to overcome this challenge with a lot of grit, a lot of determination, a lot of competence. Some people say that we'll be here in this situation for years to come, but I don't believe in that. I think in-person schooling will come back strong. I believe in our teachers, I believe in our school system, and I believe in many successes to come. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for being here with us. I do hope to see you again in our next conference or at a flip meeting. I am sure we'll be together working collaboratively throughout Brazil and throughout the world, using assessments as a very efficient tool for the learning process. Thank you very much. Enjoy this afternoon and enjoy our next sessions. Thank you. Take care.